Hello there, it's Silver. This is Dragon's Dogma 2. So just the first thing, I'm really glad that Dragon's Dogma actually got a sequel. It was one of those games that was really appreciated by sort of a niche, like hardcore RPG audience, but it never really received like a ton of mainstream attention or anything, so it was one of those games that deserved a sequel, but felt like it was never going to get one, really. So I think it's just really cool in general that a game like that actually managed to get not just a sequel, but like a big, full, AAA, huge budget sequel like this. So in Dragon's Dogma, you play as the Arisen, a person chosen by the dragon, and in this setting dragons are really almost godlike beings, the true dragons are, and it plucks your heart out and eats it and then murders you. So that's not great, but that's what happens, and this turns you into the Arisen, someone who's chosen by this dragon to basically be the test. Can you kill it or can you defeat it in battle? But of course it wouldn't be Dragon's Dogma without the pawns, and yeah, you have a really, really good character creator in this game, like one of the best I've ever seen for an RPG, and it's got so much detail that it actually includes some stuff I've never really seen before in a character creator, like your posture and how you run, even with details like how much you flex your elbows and your knees when you're walking around and stuff like that. You can actually customize that. You can even customize if you're missing any teeth individually. You can decide to plop out a couple of teeth wherever you want if you so choose. So yeah, there's a ton of options here, and you can make basically whoever you want. And when you're making your main pawn, pawns being these NPC party members that travel with you, you do make one that travels with you all the time, and you use the same character creator as you use to make your Arisen. So you have a ton of detail available to make your ideal party. And of course, speaking of detail, you gotta talk about how the game looks visually. It is definitely a visual feast. This is a really high fidelity game. It's really, really pretty and hyper detailed in terms of its depiction of this dark fantasy world. It uses a lot of desaturated colors and things for its art style, but with a lot of much more saturated colors when you're talking about stuff like magic or a lot of the enemy types, which can often glow some very bright colors to let you know that, hey, danger. And also, impressively, the game has a lot of physicality to its movement and to its characters. This is actually one of the causes of the, well, really it's the main cause of the game's performance issues in towns, but we'll get onto that a little bit later. The game has a lot of physics interactions and stuff that happens, so when you're moving around, your character feels very much grounded in this world. If you get smacked backwards and you hit a tree, you actually react as if you did hit a tree. You don't just like clip through it or anything. And the same thing happens when you're going across bridges or falling off of ledges and stuff. It's all very like realistically, physically modeled in a very impressive way. And this continues up to the large monsters and things where you can knock them off balance or have them trip and fall over. When they die and collapse, they actually will like take down trees and stuff like that with them just to show how heavy they are and how large they are. So when they actually hit the ground, they feel like they have a lot of weight to them. And they'll even send like a shockwave through the grass and stuff as they collapse, which is pretty cool. So I think it's definitely a very good-looking game in general, but I think, honestly, the part of its audio-visual presentation, I guess, that really impresses me the most are the animations. The animations for the humanoid characters and for the monsters are really good and detailed. There's a lot of different animations that all transition very naturally between each other, so that movement and combat and stuff is very fluid and slick and looks cool. And, you can send things flying through the air with a big blast of ice, or watch an ogre or a cyclops like pick something up and throw it, and it actually realistically has a lot of weight to it, so when it hits people they go ragdolling across the hills and stuff like that. And even some of the really large monsters, they have quite a lot going on, like the Chimera, for instance, because you've also got like the lion and the goat head and the snake tail and stuff that have to be animated individually, and you got to be able to track them and see what their attention is on and what they're doing, or if they're casting spells, or if they're about to charge and stuff. And then you've got some of the larger humanoid-shaped monsters like the ogres and the cyclops that can do like actual wrestling moves against you, like they'll climb up cliff sides and do like an atomic elbow drop down onto your party and stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of animation detail in this game. In regards to your character and your party, you have various vocations that you can choose to be. These are your classes, and you can change them out for free at any time. There's no penalty or anything, so you're encouraged to experiment. You won't have all of the vocations unlocked at first. There are several, about half of them, that you'll need to unlock from doing various side quests or progressing in the main quest line, and it doesn't take that long to unlock all of them, except for maybe the Warfarer, which does actually take a little while. As you kill enemies, you'll get experience towards your main character level, which is separate from your vocations, and unlike in the first Dragon's Dogma, it doesn't seem to be related to the vocation that you are, which I like, because in the original, if you leveled a whole bunch as a sorcerer, then all of your magic stats would go up, and then you would switch to a warrior, but you'd be a terrible warrior because you'd been leveling for so long as a sorcerer that all your physical stats were crap, and that doesn't happen in this game. Instead, your levels are completely separate from your vocation, and they seem to be kind of a set pseudo-random stat distribution that is not like a growth rate based one depending on what your vocation is. And instead you get discipline as you kill enemies, and the discipline is used to level up the vocations, and as they level up you can go to a guild that allows you to use this discipline to purchase new active skills and passive skills and things for each vocation, and the higher level you have it, the more skills will be available. Another thing that encourages you to experiment is the augment system. These are the passive skills that you can get with discipline, and these stay no matter what vocation you are. So once you actually learn them and purchase them, then you keep them no matter what. So even if you switch to a different vocation, you can still equip any augments you've learned from any previous ones. So this allows you to customize your build a little bit by having a combination of different vocations augments available to you. And then you've got the main attack, weapon-based attack for each class, and also the various active skills. And one thing that I'm not a huge fan of is you only have 4 active skill slots, but there are a lot of active skills per vocation in this game, so having to only choose 4 is not great. I would like a second deck so that you could have 8 total instead of just 4. I believe that's what the original Dragon's Dogma did, if I recall, although it's been a while since I played it. But either way, I think that just due to the sheer number of skills you can unlock per class, it would be nice to be able to equip more than 4. You've also got loads and loads of gear to find and buy, and there's just a huge amount of variety of stuff that you can get. It all has really nice models. A lot of the weapons are actually Dragon's Dogma 1 weapons that have been redone, so they look really, really good. I really like the weapon and armor models on this game. They just have a lot of detail to them. They're like super high fidelity, and they look really neat. And there's a lot of like dark fantasy trappings and stuff that you might expect from a setting like this, but there's also some kind of unexpected, interesting, sort of elegant, ancient looking stuff that's pretty cool to find. Every piece of equipment will have the shields of the various vocations that can equip it, so you always know what you can equip and what you can't, and you can just keep stuff however you want. So you have a limited inventory space based on weight, but you have a storage that you can access from any inn, and this is infinite, so you can put whatever you want in there and not have to worry about the weight. Equipped gear does count towards the inventory weight, even though it's not technically in your inventory, by the way. But you've also got the upgrades, which is kind of a neat system. You have various different slots on pieces of gear, usually 3 slots, that you can upgrade. And the first upgrade will take a small amount of money, and then each upgrade after that will take more money and also a bunch of different monster materials that you can get from slaying monsters around the world. And different places actually have different styles. So when you go to a smith to upgrade your gear, it depends on where you are, what exactly that upgrade is going to do. So you've got like the Vermundian upgrades, which are really like jack of all trades. They sort of increase all of the stats of something. Whatever it does, it just does it a bit better. But then you've got stuff like the Batali upgrades, which are much more physical oriented. So they'll increase the physical defense of your armor far more than the magical defense, or they'll increase the physical damage of your weapon and be not so great with magical weapons and things like that. So you can find various different smith styles throughout the world, and it leaves a little sigil whenever you upgrade something that shows you what style applied for that particular upgrade, and you can mix and match different styles depending on where you are. There's also a 4th red slot for upgrades, and this is something completely different that is done in a specific place that you'll find later on, but I don't really want to talk about how a lot of that stuff works because it's a little bit spoilery. In terms of quests, you have a pretty expansive main quest that is quite long. This is definitely a long game. It's going to take you quite a lot of time, even if you're rushing the main quest, but of course you're not going to want to do that because you want to do a lot of the side quests and explore all the various off-the-beaten-path areas and stuff too to get better loot and some levels and things. But one interesting thing about the quests in this game is some of them are time limited, and luckily it tells you, so there's no confusion. If you have a time limited quest in your journal, it has a little clock next to it to let you know, so that you know not to advance time too much if you still want to complete that quest, because there are some that are very time sensitive, like say a child getting abducted by wolves. You don't have very long to track that child before they die, so you do have to actually go and find them. This is the kind of game that only has map markers for some quests, because a lot of them have a bit of like an investigation layer to them where you're going to have to question people to find out where you need to go. Some things are not immediately obvious, and I think the game does a pretty good job of communicating this to you so that you always know where in general you should be. It will give you like a yellow circle on your map to let you know that like roughly in this area there are people that might know something, so you can actually go there and figure it out yourself. But this is another interesting thing, because something I haven't mentioned is that when you have pawns, you also can choose 2 other pawns aside from the one that you make yourself. And these are other players' pawns. You can get the pawns that other people have made, and they will also travel with you. And if they have knowledge that you don't have, they'll share it with you. So if you're doing a quest that their master has done, when you hire them, they'll lead you around the quest and tell you where to go. They'll also point out hidden things like secret rift stones to summon other pawns, or chests that are in hard to reach areas. Stuff that their master has obtained, they'll lead you to if they know where it is. They're also really good about shouting out the weakness of enemies that they know. So if their master has used a fire attack on a fire-weak enemy and made it obvious that that enemy is weak to fire, then when you fight them, they'll tell you. They'll say, hey, this enemy is weak to fire, so that you know in advance. So there's quite a lot of interaction between yourself and the pawns, and there's also a lot of just like silly little gestures and stuff that add a lot of character to the game. Like sometimes when you finish a battle, one of your pawns will stand with their arm out, and if you walk past them, then you'll high-five them, or maybe they'll do like a little fist pump gesture, and if you're next to them, you'll do it too. Little stuff like that that makes you feel like an adventuring party. Really, the pawns in this game kind of make me feel like the pawns in the first Dragon's Dogma were sort of like the proof of concept for this mechanic, because they're a lot more advanced in this game. In the first game, they were sort of like your room temperature IQ magic slave boys, but now they have a little bit more personality to them. They repeat dialogue less, although of course you're adventuring with them for a long time, so you are still going to hear repeated dialogue, but there's a lot more dialogue for a lot more topics, so that they repeat stuff less often. They'll even like talk crap about some of their previous masters and how they've dismissed them too early, or how they had a suspicious number of people going into their private chambers at night and stuff like that. They have a lot of things to say. They also enable you to solve problems in kind of unusual ways sometimes. You know, you might see a small ledge close to where you are, but just out of jumping range, and it's got a ladder that can be kicked down, so you got to find a way to get up to that to get a chest or something. Or you could just pick up one of your pawns and throw them up there, and then they'll kick the ladder down for you, and you can get to the chest that way. So there are a lot of situations, especially during like dungeon exploration and stuff, where you can find kind of clever ways around your problems by good use of your pawns. There's also just a lot of environmental interactivity in this game, you'll notice, with monsters picking up stuff and throwing it at you, or your ability to pick up rocks or chunks of ice or explosive barrels or pots of acid and throw them around the place. You'll find that a lot of structures and stuff can collapse, and bridges can be destroyed and turn into ladders and all sorts of stuff like that. So there's a lot of just stuff in the environment that makes the combat and exploration feel a lot more dynamic, because a lot of stuff can be messed with in various ways. The world itself is very, very large and is split in between 2 kingdoms. The Kingdom of Vermund, which has a lot of plains and forests surrounding it, and the Kingdom of Batal, which has a sort of desert, steppe-like environment surrounding it. And they each have their own different kinds of caves and ruins and villages and stuff in them, and there's a lot of stuff to find on the map. One thing I'm not a huge fan of is how fast travel works. And I mean, how it works in general is fine. You find these things called port crystals, these purple glowing crystals, and then you can use these consumables called fairy stones to fast travel back to any that you found. All that is fine, except there are only like 2 port crystals in the entire game. There are only just a couple of them, and they're sort of close together. There are like none of them in the entire desert. Even in the main desert city, the capital, there aren't any fast travel points at all. So instead, you have to find port crystals, these portable ones that you can keep in your inventory, and plop them down wherever you want. So you actually make your own fast travel network in this game by plopping down these crystals wherever you want to be able to return to, which is fine in theory, except these are really rare and hard to find. They're expensive. There's one NPC that sells them for 20 of these crystals that you can only get for like fighting dragons, basically. So they're not exactly easy to obtain, and I think you can only have like 10 of them on the map at any given time. So I do think that the fast travel system is a little bit unnecessarily limited for how massive the world is. But aside from that, I do think that Dragon's Dogma 2 is an absolutely phenomenal game. It is a really good dark fantasy RPG with some of the best character creation I've ever seen, and some really, really satisfying combat. If you like being a warrior, this game will make you feel really strong and powerful. If you like being a mage, this game will make you feel like you're loosing the wrath of nature on your enemies, but you're also super squishy, so don't let anything get close to you. It does a really good job, and there are also some really fun vocations you can get later on, like the Magic Archer or the Mystic Spearhand, that have a lot of really fun gameplay to them, and a lot of variety in terms of different builds and stuff and how you can play. But there are, of course, a few other things to talk about, despite how much I really, really recommend this game in general and like it a lot, one of which is the performance. The performance has gotten a lot better since launch. The last major patch they just did helped a lot in terms of the performance in cities, but it's still not quite where I'd like to see it. Basically, the performance issues in this game don't happen when you're just exploring around the world. Just wandering around, you'll get a nice solid frame rate, but in large settlements, your frame rate will tank, especially the two capital cities, because the game is doing all of those physics interaction calculations and stuff for all of the NPCs individually. So if you're in an area with a lot of NPCs, there's a lot of heavy CPU usage going on. Now, because this is CPU bound, this means that your graphics settings basically don't matter much to reducing the impact, because it's not about graphics, it's about processing. So this means that you can crank everything up way high and still get really good performance, because that's not the problem. It's just that the issue is a lot harder to solve. Now, like I said, they have gone a fair distance already in making this much better, but still something to be aware of is that the performance in this game in large cities is not quite up to par yet. And the other thing to talk about are the microtransactions, because of course this is a Capcom game, and this is something that Capcom has been doing recently, going all the way back to stuff like Devil May Cry 5 and the Resident Evil 4 remake. They're making really, really excellent games that also have these annoying microtransactions put into them that are completely ignorable. They don't really affect the balance of the game or the pacing of the game, and you don't need them at all to play and have a good time, but the fact that they're there is stupid. They shouldn't be there at all, especially in a full-priced single-player game. They shouldn't have these available in the first place. My problem with them isn't that there's some major balance-defining issue that causes the game to play worse because of their inclusion. They actually don't do that at all, and they're very easy to ignore. In fact, I think if you didn't know about them, you probably would continue not knowing about them even while playing the game, because they don't matter at all. My problem with them is that they're basically there to sucker in people with low impulse control and get them to buy things they don't need, and I'm not okay with that. So I feel that all reviews should mention the fact that these are in the game, not because they drastically damage the game, but because there are people that are vulnerable to this sort of thing, and they should know that these exist in the game beforehand just because. But overall, I do think that despite these smaller issues, Dragon's Dogma 2 is a fantastic RPG, and if you're a fan of action RPGs in general, then you definitely owe it to yourself to play it. I understand that it is a bit expensive at $70, but I think it is at least worth the $60 of a normal full-priced game if you can get it for that, and depending on how you feel about games like this, you may even want to pay full price for it, but that's entirely up to you. It is a really solid RPG that has a ton of gameplay and some really impressive visuals and weight to its movement and combat and stuff that make it really stand out a lot, and I just think it's super cool that Dragon's Dogma managed to get a sequel of this caliber. So I'll put the link in the description below this video to the Steam store page for Dragon's Dogma 2 if you wish to check it out yourselves. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.